My ex cheated on me with my best friend, then had the nerve to tell me he would cancel his entire wedding just to get me back, so I let him believe he still had a chance and watched everything fall apart. I want to be honest with you before this story goes anywhere, because honesty is the only thing I have left that is entirely mine. I am not the innocent one here. I was wronged first, yes, and the wronging was real and it was devastating, but what I did with that devastation is something I have to own completely, without softening it, without burying it inside the larger story of what was done to me. Because I had a choice. I made it carefully and deliberately over the course of more than a year. And the outcome of that choice is the reason I am sitting here writing this instead of living a life that actually moves forward. His name was Daniel. We were together for 4 years. 4 years is enough time to build a language that only two people speak, enough time to stop seeing how remarkable ordinary things are, the specific way someone laughs, the fact that they remember exactly how you take your coffee without being asked. Daniel was calm in a way that felt like solid ground. He was consistent. He showed up. I had spent enough years before him with people who evaporated the moment something better appeared, so when I found someone who stayed, who remembered, who was simply and reliably present, I built my sense of safety directly on top of that. I built everything on top of that. Kayla had been my closest friend for 6 years before any of this happened. We met in college. She was the person I called when my mother was in the hospital, the person who drove 4 hours without being asked to sit in a waiting room with me. I trusted her inside my relationship the way you trust someone who is essentially family. I talked to her about Daniel with complete openness. I brought her into our home. I gave her access to the most honest version of my life because I believed she was safe. I found out on a Tuesday. Daniel had left his laptop open on the kitchen counter while he was in the shower. A message notification appeared from Kayla. I would not have looked except the preview showed 4 words that rearranged everything I thought I knew. The 4 words were, "I miss your hands." I stood there with my coffee going cold and read those 4 words 11 times before my brain agreed to process them. I did not confront him that morning. I closed the laptop, finished my coffee, got dressed, and went to work. I answered emails. I attended a meeting. I ate lunch at my desk. And underneath all of it, something in me went very quiet in a way that was more frightening than any emotion I had ever felt before. Because I had cried over people before. I had begged and made myself small and desperate, and it had never once changed anything. But this was different. This was the 2 people I trusted most. And the quiet that settled into me was not the quiet of someone about to fall apart. It was the quiet of someone making a decision. That night I went through his laptop while he slept. I know that removes any clean moral position from the start of this story. I did it anyway. What I found was 4 months of messages. 4 months of something that had begun as a slow emotional drift and become a complete relationship conducted entirely in the margins of mine. They had been physically involved. They had discussed me, not cruelly, but in the careful analytical tone that 2 people use when they are trying to convince themselves that what they are doing is not as awful as it actually is. Kayla had written, "She deserves someone who is fully present." As though the solution to me deserving better was the 2 of them deciding what better looked like, together, behind my back. I closed the laptop. I went back to bed. I lay next to Daniel in the dark and stared at the ceiling, and I decided that I was not going to be the woman who collapsed. I was going to understand the full scope of it first. Leave on my own terms. Walk out as someone who chose to go, not someone who got discarded. That part of the plan was reasonable. What came after was not. I confronted Daniel 3 days later. I laid out everything I had found without raising my voice once. I watched him cycle through denial and then a particular kind of collapse I had never seen on him before. He did not minimize it once I made clear I had read everything. He sat across from me at our kitchen table and said, "I'm sorry," and then, because he was Daniel and he believed in directness even when it destroyed him, he said, "I think I fell in love with her." That sentence did something specific to me. Not the words themselves but the voice. The same calm, certain voice he had used with me for 4 years. I realized in that moment that the steadiness I had spent 4 years reading as mine had never been specifically mine. It was just who he was. It worked on anyone who got close enough. I told him I needed time. He moved to the couch. I texted Kayla, told her I knew, told her I never wanted to hear from her again. She called 12 times. I did not answer once. Within 2 months they were public. Within 8 months he had proposed to her. I found out through mutual friends, through the specific cruelty of social media, through seeing a photo of a ring on Kayla's hand on a platform where I had deliberately not blocked her because I wanted to be able to see. I watched the congratulations pour in from people who had once sat at my table. I watched Kayla post about being the luckiest woman alive. And something shifted in me that grief alone would not have produced. Grief I could have survived. But watching the 2 people who had dismantled my life build something together from the pieces, watching them be celebrated for it, watching the world arrange itself around their happiness, that turned my grief into something cold and deliberate. And that is where the part of this story I have to fully own begins. 3 months before the wedding, Daniel messaged me. Late at night, the kind of message people write when the life they chose is finally showing them its true weight. He said he had been thinking about me. That he was not sure he had made the right choice. That the guilt of what he had done had never left him and was becoming impossible to carry. And then, at the end, the line I had not expected: I would end all of it. If you told me there was a chance. I read it 4 times. And then I thought about the ring photo. The congratulations comments. She deserves someone who is fully present. I thought about the 4 months of messages, and the voice Daniel used when he said he had fallen in love with someone else. And I wrote back. I told him I had been thinking about him too. I told him I was not over it. I chose every word with the precision of someone who wanted to keep a door open just wide enough for hope to survive without ever actually stepping through it. I did not tell him I forgave him. I did not tell him I wanted him back. I just let every sentence sit at an angle that invited him to believe both things if he needed to. He needed to. The messages that followed were, from his side, increasingly desperate. He was unraveling and sending me the evidence of it in real time. He told me the engagement had changed something. That he was not sure he could be who she needed. That being with me had felt different in a way he had not understood until it was gone. And I listened. I responded. I kept it alive with exactly the precision of someone who had thought carefully about how much fuel to add and when. I was never going to go back to him. I want to be completely clear about that. I had no interest in returning to a relationship with a man who had spent 4 months deceiving me with my closest friend. What I wanted was simpler and considerably uglier. I wanted the wedding not to happen. I wanted Kayla to arrive at the day she had built on top of my life and feel the specific gravity of doubt. I wanted Daniel to stand at that altar carrying the knowledge that he had chosen wrong. I wanted my fingerprints on the ending of their story in a way neither of them could trace back to me. I told myself this was reclaiming something. I told myself the damage they had done to me justified what I was doing. I told myself, and this is the line I am most ashamed of, that I was not hurting anyone who had not already hurt me first. 6 days before the wedding, Daniel told me he was going to call it off. He asked if I would meet him. Said he needed to see my face before he made the final decision. Said he could not do this without knowing if something real was still there. I told him I would be there. And then I went silent. No explanation. No block. No final message. I simply closed the door on every thread and waited. The wedding happened 5 days later. I watched the photos appear in real time. Kayla in her dress. Daniel, pale and composed, present in the strictly physical sense of the word. The reception. The cake. The first dance. People who had once been my people raising glasses to her. And I sat in my apartment and I waited for the satisfaction I had built the entire last year of my life around. I waited for the sense of power. For the feeling that I had made them pay for what they had done. It did not come. What came instead was the realization that I had spent 14 months constructing a plan that had produced exactly nothing. Daniel had gone through with it. Kayla had no idea any of it had happened. The people toasting them had no idea I existed. And I was alone, watching the celebration of the life built on top of mine, holding nothing. No closure. No power. No justice. Just silence. And the beginning of understanding what I had actually done. 3 days after the wedding, Daniel sent one final message. It did not arrive with anger. It arrived flat, drained of everything, and it said only, I told her. 2 words I had not planned for. He had confessed to Kayla. Days into their marriage. He had told his brand new wife about the messages, about almost calling off the wedding, about my silence in the final days. Whether it was guilt or the need to transfer weight or simply the particular integrity that had always been his most disorienting quality, I do not know. What I know is that he told her, and that what followed dismantled every last thing I thought I had controlled. Kayla called me within the hour. I almost did not answer. Some residual reflex of the 6 years we had been family made me pick up. The call lasted 4 minutes. She was not screaming. That was worse. She was completely, terrifyingly calm, and she used that calm like a precise instrument. She told me she knew what I had done. She told me I had deliberately tried to destroy her marriage not because I wanted healing but because I wanted wreckage. She said she knew she had hurt me, that she had always known it, but that what I had done was not the action of someone trying to recover. It was the action of someone who had decided that if she could not have her life back, she would make sure no one else got to have one either. And then she said the line I have not been able to stop hearing. She said, "You spent over a year making sure you could feel something. And now you feel nothing. I hope it was worth it." She hung up. I sat with the phone in my hand and the silence in the room pressed against me from every direction. Because she was right. That was the part that made it unbearable. Not that she had said it, but that I could not find a single sentence to argue with. I had spent 14 months. I had been careful and patient and precise. And I had produced nothing except the knowledge of what I was capable of, and the specific emptiness that comes from spending a year on something that was never going to give you back what you lost. What happened next happened quickly, the way social consequences always do when the story is already written before you get to tell your version. The shared network of friends that had maintained careful neutrality after the breakup began to contract. Some of it was visible. Someone I had known for 5 years left a group chat without explanation. A woman I had genuinely cared about posted something about the kind of cruelty that disguises itself as pain. She did not name me. She did not need to. Others disappeared in quieter ways. Invitations stopped arriving. Conversations became shorter. The temperature in rooms I used to feel welcome in dropped by several degrees. And the particular thing about that kind of social withdrawal is that there is nothing to confront. No single person to face. Just the cumulative experience of being subtly, consistently, unmistakably left out, until the absence of your name and plans you used to be part of becomes its own kind of permanent statement. At work, a colleague named Priya, who had been a small but genuine source of warmth in my days, started giving me the careful, professional distance of someone who has heard a version of a story and decided where she stands. She never said a word. She did not have to. The distance communicated everything. And the worst part of that particular loss was that I could not address it without confirming whatever she had heard. There was no version of that conversation where I came out looking like someone worth reconsidering. So I absorbed it and went on showing up and doing my work and feeling the specific weight of being physically present in a space where you have already been quietly ruled out. I called my sister 6 weeks after the wedding. I told her everything, the full version, not the one I had been telling people. She listened all the way through. And in the silence after I finished, she said, with the specific gentleness of someone who loves you enough to be honest, you didn't get even. You just made sure no one could root for you anymore. I did not argue. There was nothing to argue with. Here is what I have come to understand about what I actually did, not the version I told myself while I was doing it, but the version that became visible once the plan had run its course and the results were in. I had experienced a real and serious betrayal. The pain of it was genuine. The damage was real. And instead of grieving it, instead of doing the slow and unglamorous work of actually healing, I had taken that pain and constructed a project out of it. The project felt like power. It felt like agency. It felt, for 14 months, like I was the one finally holding something instead of having things taken from me. But the power was imaginary the entire time. The agency was imaginary. I was not strategic. I was just someone in pain who had found a way to be in pain loudly without anyone being able to hear it, and had confused the noise of it for progress. The friends who remained after the contraction were fewer than I had understood my social life to be. When you lose your closest friend and your long-term partner simultaneously, you discover how much of your world was built around those two relationships as a kind of shared infrastructure. The ones who stayed were people further from the center, people who knew me independently. They were kind. But there is a particular loneliness in realizing that the people who knew you across years, across ordinary Tuesday evenings and bad weeks, and the version of you that existed before you made the choices you made, have already decided, and their decision is that you are not someone they need to make space for anymore. Daniel's last message arrived about 2 weeks after the wedding. It said, "I hope you got what you wanted." 6 words, no anger, just a flatness that contained everything. I read it and turned my phone face down and sat in my apartment in the silence that I had, in a very direct sense, manufactured for myself. Because the honest answer to those 6 words was no. I had not gotten what I wanted. I was not entirely sure what I had wanted, somewhere between Kayla feeling uncertainty and the wedding not happening in some version of the story where I mattered enough to change the outcome. None of those things had happened. The wedding had happened. The marriage was absorbing the crisis. The social circle had redistributed. And I was here, in an apartment that had become too quiet in the specific way of a space that reflects back exactly what you have put into it. I think about the dog sometimes. Daniel and I had a dog together. He kept it. I agreed to that in the separation because it was fair. I find myself grieving the dog with a simplicity that I cannot apply to anything else, because the dog was not complicated. The dog just loved both of us and got taken away when we stopped deserving the uncomplicated version of things. My sister calls more than she used to. My mother knows the shape of it without knowing the details. Those 2 relationships have become the majority of what I have, and I am not saying that dramatically or looking for sympathy. I am saying it because it is the accurate inventory of what a year of careful, deliberate, self-righteous planning produced. Rebuilding is not the same as recovering. I want to be precise about that. Rebuilding is just the daily work of constructing something livable after you have watched the previous version of your life come apart. It is not triumphant. It is not a montage. It is making coffee in the morning and going to work and coming home and sitting with the knowledge of what you are capable of and finding somewhere to put it that does not consume the rest of the day. Some days that works. Some days it does not. What I know now, with a full picture visible in a way it never was while I was inside the plan, is this. The betrayal I experienced was real and it deserved to be grieved. And I did not grieve it. I weaponized it. I picked it up and I pointed it, and I spent 14 months convinced I was aiming at the people who had hurt me, and when the smoke cleared, the only person standing in the wreckage was me. They are still there. Together. Older. Changed, probably, by what happened. But there. And I am here, having traded over a year of my actual life for a satisfaction that never arrived, holding nothing except the clear and complete knowledge of exactly what kind of person I became in the space between being hurt and choosing what to do about it. That knowledge does not leave. There is no morning where I wake up and it has gone somewhere. It is just there, quiet and permanent, the way the truest things always are. I did not lose Daniel the day I found those messages. I did not lose Kayla the day I sent that text. I lost them both the day I decided that making them feel something was worth more than actually healing. That was the real ending. Everything after was just me watching the consequences of that one decision arrange themselves around me, slowly, completely, with the patience of things that are simply true. You can be wronged and still be wrong. That is the sentence I keep coming back to. That is the thing I wish someone had made me understand before I decided that being hurt was the same as having permission. It is not. It was never going to be. And now I know that in the only way that actually sticks. The hard way. The permanent way. The way that does not come with a second chance.